So this Bigfoot tear. So as this deer takes off, the spider turns, and I see it start moving, and then it starts running on 4. And as it gets momentum, it goes up on 2. It's gaining on this deer, and by then it's getting out of my eye light, or my headlight. So I got to see it stand up, and so I could see the back of it. And this thing, when it stood up, I could see, it looked to me like more hair, because I could see like in the scapula area, shoulder blades, you could see like skinish through it, and it did taper down. And this thing was lean but muscular. The best way I could describe it is kind of like Michael Phelps, the swimmer. You know how his arms are really long and he's got dinner plate sized hands? Yes. He was like Michael Phelps on steroids with a little bit more muscle.
Escorting you through the night, lighting the way, warding off thieves, ghosts, demons, and other oddities. Along the journey, his companions would often share with him the most curious of stories that he'd record in his Codex. Perhaps you just might find yourself traveling with the Codega and sharing one of yours. You're walking alone down a quiet country road. It's late. The trees are whispering. Up ahead, something crouches by the ditch. Massive, low to the ground, moving like a spider. Not quite human, not quite animal. And then it looks at you. Welcome, curious wanderers, to another episode of Codega's Codex of Curiosities. Your torchlight in the tunnel, your whisper in the dark, and your guide through the fog of the unknown. I'm Rai, your host, the Codega, and tonight we're peeling back the bark of the deep woods to reveal something ancient, something crouching, something crawling. My guest is John Reiners, author, investigator, and eyewitness to a creature most refuse to believe exists, and even fewer believe moves the way he saw it move. His book, Crouching Behemoth, Quadrupedal Sasquatch, challenges everything we know about Bigfoot lore. You know, we've been trained to think Sasquatch as a towering bipedal figure, a shaggy forest sentinel walking upright like a man. But what if some of them don't? What if some drop to all fours, skittering low to the ground, spider-like, swift and silent, and maybe even predatory? Tonight, we're diving into John's unforgettable encounter and the many eerie, similar reports that followed. Accounts of massive hunched forms crawling across roads, slinking through trees, and staring back from the edges of the firelight. Is this a rare behavior of the creature we call Bigfoot, or something else entirely? A different species, a different being, or perhaps something that has been hiding among us longer than we dare to imagine? So grab your flashlights, keep your eyes on the shadows, and don't wander too far from the trail, because tonight, the behemoth isn't standing tall. It's crawling, watching, and waiting. All right, so before we get to John, I just want to say thank you, everyone, for tuning in once again. Again, if you aren't a fan of commercials, jump over to my Patreon. You know, for the price of a good coffee, you can get all this content ad-free. Yeah, ad-free, because ads suck. We all know that, but they have to be on because somehow we got to get paid somehow. All right. And if you're enjoying this content, especially, you know, if you're enjoying Bigfoot, I have previous episodes. Go check them out. You know, the Alaskan Hairy Man with Fred Roll. I have many others. So, like I said, if you guys like this content, make sure you subscribe and then go check out my my library. Without further ado, without wasting any more time, let's bring John to the stage. John, welcome to Codega's Codex of Curiosities.
Hi, Ryan. I'm really happy to be here, and I appreciate the invite. I've been excited, and I've always listened to the quality of your guests and get great guests, so I was honored to get the invitation. I was excited about it. I know we spoke online a couple of weeks ago about it. I was on vacation at the time, and I've been anticipating since then. I can't wait.
Perfect. I know myself as well. You know, I'm pretty excited, and I'm glad to have you on. You know, when I heard your experience on Sasquatch Chronicles with Wes there, it's kind of unnerving when you hear this part of the story, this part of like the lore of Sasquatch and Bigfoot, because it's something you don't hear very often. And it kind of gives it this much more eerie sense, and I can only imagine what it looked like. I've never seen Bigfoot myself, but I like just imagining this huge creature crawling like a spider is something crazy. But before we jump into that, I definitely want to say, tell our listeners and viewers a little bit about yourself and where they can find you.
Okay. My name is John Reiners. I live in Owensboro, Kentucky. I've been here, I guess, about 18 and a half, 19 years now. I grew up in the Black Hills of South Dakota, Rapid City, and it was a great place to grow up, middle class, um, you know, and I got to do a lot of things. Fishing was my first love. I got into fishing, really, really hardcore fisherman. And after I got out of the Coast Guard, my parents had moved out of South Dakota. They went to Texas to start a business. When I was 18, I'm not going into my senior year and saying, no, I'm going to move and start new. So I stayed there by myself, which was kind of, I don't know, it had some good things and bad things about being a 17-year-old, being alone, still in high school. But I'd say I had some fun. We'll just,
I could imagine. I could imagine.
but anyway, I graduated, did really good. They said as long as my grades were good, I didn't have to, go down to Texas with them. So that was the caveat. I had to keep my grades up. So then after that, um, I thought about going to nursing school at the time. Well, in South Dakota back then, you had to be in a dorm. Well, it was female only, so I kind of gave up on that. I got a job. I went to Texas, worked in a warehouse for a while, and then I thought, you know what? I think the Coast Guard sounds like something I'd be interested in. So I found out back then it wasn't as easy as to get into the Coast Guard. I thought they'd just sign me up in 5 minutes. Well, I had to go through these screenings and a lie detector. They asked me a couple questions that made me a little nervous, like, have you ever drank alcohol? Have you ever done this or that? And I was watching that little meter going up and down. So, but I was honest. I told them everything I knew. Well, long story short, I get in the Coast Guard, go through boot camp. My first assignment was on the Coast Guard cutter Gallatin. We did search and rescue, drug interdiction. So that kind of got me started on my nursing that came later. I started getting really interested in what the corpsmen were doing and, life saving. And that was kind of like the mode I was in. So eventually I ended up at the Pay and Finance Center after I got off the Gallatin. I was there for about a year and a half. Went to I don't know if you remember the Exxon Valdez oil spill.
Oh yeah,
It was
oh
in
yeah.
like
That's a
March
big
of
one.
'89. So when the oil spill happened, I was a single guy. I said, you know what? I'll volunteer to go up there. I was at that time a pay and finance auditor in Topeka. So I was learning the financial end and all that stuff. So I thought, you know what? That'd be kind of cool. Go up to Alaska. So they sent me to the Marine Safety Office in Anchorage. So I lived there for about a year. And they actually gave me something called the power of Coast Guard. I had the commandant's authority. I could look through the rolls, call a different base, and say, I need these three people. Captain would argue, well, who are you? I said, well, if you want, you can talk to the commandant or my captain. And oh, no, we'll send the person up here. So I would go pick them up on the seaplane and I'd have their arrangements. Actually, I'd pick them at the airport, get them on a seaplane, send them to the different beaches they were needed to clean oil. So these hands did not get dirty or oil stained. I was like behind the scenes, but I loved it, man. I really got a feel for Alaska, and it was nice to spend all that time up there. So after that, I ended up starting a business. And the business I started, I learned how to import wicker and rattan. I did my 4 year enlistment, wanted something different. So I worked at a furniture store for a while in Hickory, North Carolina. That's kind of the furniture capital. So I made a contact there of a upholsterer. Well, then I started importing my own wicker and rattan, started my own business. I went out on the coast of Carolina. I was importing rattan arms for sofas. He was building the sofas, so I started wholesaling up and down the coast. Eventually, I ended up opening up my own store. It turned into a fairly big business. Did pretty well with it. But then one day I came home, told my wife, I'm not happy. I'm like 42 days in a row without a day off, paying everybody else first. You pay yourself last. I said, I'm not happy. I want to go to nursing school. So I've laid out all the brochures. I've decided that's what I was wanting to do years ago. That's what I'm going to do. So now, fast forward, I've been a nurse about 25 years. I've been in Owensboro 18. So 18 years I've been here. I've worked in orthopedics as my strong suit. I did that for years, and I was a supervisor on orthopedics. And then years later, I decided I wanted a little bit of a change. Once I changed, I decided to get into mental health. Mental health is something I always wanted to get into because we can talk about that a little bit later. I have a family history of some mental health, so I wanted to. I wasn't ready at the time when I was first a nurse, but I figured as I get older, my knees get creakier. I'm 58. It's no joke running up and down these med surge halls. So now I do something a lot different, working mental health nursing. So that kind of leads me up to working at the hospital. Kind of leads me up to what I'm going to tell you in a minute. People ask me as a nurse, how in the world did you get into riding a Bigfoot? Like, so it's pretty easy. You remember COVID. Now, I don't want to, people got their different takes on COVID. Oh, I don't like the vaccine, everything. I'm not going to lie. I'm hardcore. I didn't want to get the vaccine, all that. And I understand what people's feelings are. But in a hospital setting, when you're at work, I was told you're going to be working. We need your experience on the COVID floor. So I worked that floor. So I didn't change my mind about the general perceptions of COVID, but when the people that got it taken hold of and ended up on a unit like that, I was taking care. We were taking care of the sickest of the sick. So, and the reason I'm bringing this up is because I was working on that floor. I went to another floor that I normally was considered my home unit. It was a sensitive type of patients that were vulnerable. Some of them had cancer and different things, so you didn't want to bring COVID up to that floor. So they would swab you. Like I'd do 3 days at the COVID floor, maybe come up to our unit, and they'd do a swab that morning as you left the COVID floor, and then that night, if you're good to go, you'd come in and everything's hunky dory. So one evening, I get a phone call and they said you've got COVID, you can't come in. Now this was early on. Later on, it's like you got COVID. If you're on the COVID floor, it didn't matter. They would just make you work the COVID floor, figuring the patient got COVID anyway. But up on this floor, you couldn't come. So that's when I said, well, got a couple of options there. So they told me I had to stay home for 7 days. So at the time, my father-in-law was living with us, and he had been really ill, and he was just getting in the early signs of dementia. And I thought, oh boy, I don't want to come home. He and my wife, Darlene, they'd been out shopping all day while I was home sleeping. So when I found out I had it, I called her on the phone and said, look, we got a cabin up at Rough River Lake. It's about 58 miles from Owensboro. And I told her that, how about I meet you in the parking lot of the grocery store? I text you a list. If you can go in, get groceries, stick them in the toolbox of my truck, I don't have to contact you or your dad. And then you guys go get swabbed, make sure your dad doesn't already got it from me. So we did that. So on the way up, that's when I had my Bigfoot encounter. So now end up, 3-4 years later, now I've got a book about it. So
And what was the name of your book again? What was it? Can you
Crouching Behemoth, Quadrupedal Sasquatch.
and
It took me
where
a
can
while.
everybody find that?
Okay, that's on Amazon. If you go to Amazon and put Crouching Behemoth, Quadrupedal Sasquatch, it'll come right up. And there's a
That's
good.
quite a unique title. I don't think there's going to be much other ones similar to that.
No, I try to tell people it's a neat book. There's a lot of good Bigfoot books out there, and there's some of them that I look at, like people like Jeff Meldrum, Dr. Meldrum, his book, I put that way up there. That's more of a scientific type of study and book. I'll get into mine in a little bit, but what I say, a totally different kind of book. It covers a lot of different things that I've never seen in another Bigfoot book.
Okay, fantastic. Okay, so let's set this up. It's and so this was in November, was it?
Yeah, it was in November. I got to look up the year. I put November of 2020.
Okay,
Around the
okay.
17th of November.
And you just got all your groceries.
Yeah, so I get the groceries, and I knew I couldn't ask my wife. I wasn't that sick. I had a little bit of a sore throat, and I had 7 days. So that at the time, so I already knew what I was going to do. When I got up there, at that time, I was working on this other book. My first book was more than just fishing: the lifelong tale of a father-son friendship.
I
And
saw that as well. I saw that as well.
yeah, so I was in
That's
the
great.
middle of that book, so I thought, you know what, I'm going to get 7 days to work on that book, and that was basically a book about growing up fishing with my dad. We made a pact when I was young, and my dad's 86. The guy still works 3 days a week selling golf carts, sharp as a tack. We still go on an annual fishing trip every year. Matter of fact, that's partly what I was doing when you made contact with me a few weeks ago. Yeah, but anyway, so that was that. So I thought, all right, I'll get an opportunity. I called my dad and we were reminiscing about the stories, and I was writing them down. Comparing notes, and like, remember that time we were at Dale Hollow Lake and this happened. So it gave me a good. I actually made the most of the time. But anyway, so on the way up there, I don't know. I'm in Owensboro, Kentucky, so we're roughly 58 miles to Rough River Lake. It's in like Grayson and Breckenridge County, Kentucky. And up there, it's a lot more hilly. We're down in Owensboro, and we get the Ohio River comes right across, and right across the river, of course, you got Indiana, so we're right there on the river. So I'm on the way up, and by this time it's about 9 o'clock. 9 p.m. and because I work the night shift, so I'm driving down there. I'm on 54 East, and there's this little town you come to called Fordsville. Fordsville, I wouldn't call it a town as much as a burg. It's got a fire department, cafe. I think one of them little bitty post offices. Just like one street, you drive right through it. And yeah, those little bitty kind of Americana kind of town, real cool little area. So then once I get through Fordville, there's a highway. It's 261. So 261, I take that, and it's an 11-mile stretch to get to 105, and then 105 I hit, and I go south to the lake. So that's where I had my encounter on that 11-mile stretch. Now, when I get on that 11-mile stretch, it's the first 10 miles. It's pretty much wooded, and it's not a lot of houses and stuff like that. The woods come right up to the road, and I've had in that stretch where you got to really watch for deer because boy, they'll get out there and you hit one of these and
Oh yeah, that's it. That's it for your vehicle, pretty much. Yeah.
exactly. I even had a horse one time. I don't know where it came from. It was right standing right in the middle of the road. I down there hit it, but so you never know what kind of critter you'll see out there. Well, the last mile you're going towards this area called McQuady. Now, McQuady is McQuady MC like Mick. So basically, there's a service station, a stoplight, and I call it a Mick post office because it's one of them little post offices that's not manned a lot of the times. It's basically a trailer. So I call that the Mick post office. So I was about an hour from a mile from the Mick post office. So I'm driving down. At this time, I had a Ford F-150. It was a 6-cylinder, so it would rattle a little bit. And I'm coming down the road, and on the right, like I say, I'm 10 miles in, a mile before McQuady. It turns into where there's still woods, but it opens up, and you see a farm or two here and there with lots of land. So it's more at this time in November, the fields are tilled, so you can see like stubbles of a cornfield. So I get to this section. There's a wood ravine right along the road, and about 40 yards after that, there's a second ravine. In between is kind of the field, and the field goes off. So about 40 yards back, there's a second ravine, but it extends just a little bit further than the first ravine. So that's going to come into play in a minute. So as I'm driving on the right side of the road, I see this greenish white eye shine. So this creature's coming towards, and all of a sudden it enters the road. I can see right away is a buck, and big beautiful buck. If I was a hunter, I'd be like, my heart would be going pitter patter. It was like one of the nicest bucks. I've lived in Kentucky, like I say, 18, 19 years. I think it was probably the biggest or second biggest I've seen since I lived here. I've seen smaller ones on a wall, put it that way. So this big beautiful buck enters, and he stops. So I'm like, what in the world is this thing doing? I'm getting closer and closer and closer. I was going 55 at the time, so definitely slowing down because a lot of times you get that, then more deer are going to enter up. So you started breaking early, thinking another one comes. So this thing didn't move, but he never looked over my way. He was standing there, so I'm looking at his flank. He's just looking off this way. So I don't know what's going on. So I get slower, slower, slower. Well, as I get closer, your headlights, the shine of your headlights goes off to the side, so it starts illuminating things. So I'm getting closer, and then I see this orange eye shine. And what I told you a little bit ago about how you got the two ravines, that one that was 40 yards back at the end, right there, I see some goldy orange looking eye shine. These things were about as big as a horse's eyes or a silver dollar. And I don't know, the gap was about double what you'd think on a human would be, but they were forward facing. You know how, like a deer, you can tell how they got the
Yeah, they're on the sides. Yeah,
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 this is
because
binocular vision. So they're looking right at me.
yeah, like herbivores are always on the sides, and carnivores or predators
Yep.
are always in the
So
front.
right away, I was thinking as a predator of some kind. I think that's why this deer is looking over there. But why would he come over closer to it unless he just got on the road and then saw it? So that, at that point, I wasn't sure. I figured it out in a little bit, and I'll tell you how I figured it out. So this thing, I'm looking at it. It was maybe 3 foot off the ground, 3.5 feet, and the thing's moving. Well, as I get closer, I'm slowing down. I get more light on the subject. Well, that's when I see it. It looks like a human-shaped head. And the best way I can tell you is on the front of my book. That's modeled off of what I saw. So you see how the head's shaped? It's a little conical, but it's got hair. It's kind of like me, a receding hairline. It even had hair. See how my beard is? People at work joke because I shaved the mustache off, look kind of Amish, but I kind of try to make myself look like a Bigfoot a little bit without the beard. But that's kind of how it is. The hair comes around like that's what I saw. Skin's kind of grayish color. Now I'll tell you how I got that cover in a bit. So anyway, that's what the model of what I saw. So
And how fast were you going in your vehicle at that time? Because
at
you
the
have the deer
time
in
I
front.
saw it, I was probably down to maybe like 20. And I eventually I think I came to a complete stop by the time I got right up on the deer. But as soon as I saw that, I started slowing down. I probably was down to like 5 or 3. It's a rural highway. I say a highway, but it's one lane. And at that time of year, at night, you very seldom get a car coming down there. So there was no car, so it was safe to slow down. I could see miles behind me, the straight road. I would have seen headlights coming well before. So as I see it, what I see is this head, massive shoulders, but these arms are kind of moved out at an odd angle. At that time, I wasn't sure they were arms. I figured out that. But then the back had these things. It looked like it was moving around kind of like a spider. It was moving to look at me like kind of moves around, and now he's facing me instead of where the deer was. And I'm like, what in the heck? And it the best way I could describe it, it looked like a spider or a crab spider. You ever see a crab spider and they scurry and kind of go like this? That's kind of what he was doing. And then he stopped and froze. Well, by that time I'm almost stopped, and this deer is still looking over there. So that time I'm slowing down and I'm starting to realize reality's setting in. I started. My first thought was, "My God, am I hallucinating? That's not really one of the COVID signs. Maybe I got it worse than I thought. I really did. I thought there was something going on." So
Wow.
at some point, this deer just bolts, and when the deer took off, usually I've seen enough deer. I told you I grew up in South Dakota. Deer hunting and all that, the whole gamut. But I've seen deer take off and be really fast. When this deer took off, it's almost like I can't say it was a half-hearted run. It took off like it was exhausted, which was really weird. And I do think that it was panting when it came up on the road, but it took off like where this Sasquatch is. It didn't go right towards him. There's open field over this way, so he takes off kind of maybe at I'd say 10 o'clock. And so this Bigfoot tear. So as this deer takes off, the spider turns and I see it start moving, and then it starts running on 4. And as it gets momentum, it goes up on 2. It's gaining on this deer, and by then it's getting out of my eye light or my headlight. So I got to see it stand up, and so I could see the back of it. And this thing, when it stood up, I could see it looked to me like more hair because I could see like in the scapula area, shoulder blades, you could see like skinish through it, and it did taper down. And this thing was lean but muscular. The best way I could describe it is kind of like Michael Phelps, the swimmer. You know how his arms are really long and he's got dinner plate sized hands. It was like Michael Phelps on steroids with a little bit more muscle. You know how lean he was. A lot of wild animals I've ever seen are really lean because they don't lay around like I do on a couch, with my hand up like this and everything. But a lot of the wild animals you see are lean. And it was lean and fit. This thing looked like it. And there was no doubt in my mind he was going to catch him. By that time, it was too far to see. And I didn't hear, so I rolled my window down. Think I'm going to see if I hear anything. Maybe I can hear it. And I think what happened is I think it could have run him down on all fours. I think that the reason it stood up is because this buck had such a nice rack. I started thinking about it. If you're low, those times them horns, I think they go towards the neck. When I've talked to other witnesses that have said the same thing, I think they go for the neck and wring the neck and bring a deer down. So I think it stood up to keep those horns from poking him, and so his head was higher than the deer. So when he wringed the neck, if it poked, it'd be like in the chest area. But this thing was a little over 7.5 feet tall, and
And can I ask a question? Like, its
sure.
back legs, when it was in this spider-like position, how were its back legs looking? Like, I can kind of imagine the fronts, kind of like arms out on the sides, and did it almost seem like it was on its fingertips as well? Is
Well,
that
there where this ravine was, there is some grass. That time of year, it's kind of died out. It's like dead looking. So, but it looked to me like I could see like on the back. I believe he was on the balls of his feet because the feet you could definitely see the ankles were turned at a funny angle, and you could see like what looked like the top of feet. At the time, I didn't know like they were bent. So if they were feet, indeed, they were on the ball like up by the toes, up by the metatarsals. They were like that. The hands were down, but to me it appeared. Some people I've talked to have said they've seen a knuckle walk. Other people say, and when I talk about Dr. Meldrum in a bit, what he told me, I'll tell you a little bit more about what he said about the hands and stuff. But to me, it was too hard to tell if it was on the fingers, but I don't think it was on the knuckles because you could kind of see how it tapered down on the arm and it looked like the top of hands. So I didn't see like the fingertips would have been probably in the grass was maybe like that deep. So I didn't get to see that part of it. But when he stood up, I was looking at the back of him, and this thing, like I say, that's when it really hit me what it was. Because when I first saw it, I didn't know. Like I've heard of cryptids, like different types. At first, I thought it was a cryptid of some kind because I've seen so many different wild animals. I've never seen anything that looked like that. But the face looked more human. So, but I was like, what in the world's it doing? And so when it stood up, then I'm like, ha ha, that's a Sasquatch. And like it came out of. It's always funny how something like that becomes real. Then people ask me if like I was terrified. No, because I still felt safe. I felt sorry for the poor deer. He was going that way after the deer. I wasn't the prey, so I felt like I don't think my pickup could have squealed fast enough and outrun it if he turned. So as it disappeared, that's when I was going to start moving. But as I mentioned earlier, I had my window down. I was going to see if I could smell anything or hear anything. Well, that's when I got my second scare. Off to my right, there's some woods that come up to the side of the road. I hear a crash. I thought, oh my God. So I don't know if something threw a branch or if a tree went down, but it was significantly loud, like one loud crash. And then it dawned on me that deer, I think, was being stalked out of there. I think this other one, I think he was on all four in an ambush mode. I think the deer was supposed to come right by the end of that ravine and go into those trees for safety. There was another one, I'm pretty sure. I don't know what else could have made that crash. I think that was stalking this deer. And when the deer, I said he took off and he seemed tired, I think that was the deal. I think this thing probably been stalked. Who knows? Hours, maybe. And but I think when he took off, that's why he wasn't very fast. I think that he was exhausted, and he saw this thing, and I think he knew he had impending death. He was standing there making a decision: do I let this idiot in the car hit me? Is that a better way to go, or do I going to take a fighting chance and go off this way? And I think it probably went through the deer's mind. I think I'll just go this way. So I don't know if he saw what was on the end there. He might not have seen it. But I think he sensed that his life was coming to an end. But it was scary, I'll tell you that. And when I heard that noise, I'm in first gear and I tried as best I could my pickup. So then when I get up to that town I called you in McQuady with the little post office, I pulled in there and collected myself. I was sitting there like trying to analyze what I saw. And then I started thinking, should I drive back and put my brights on and see if anything comes? Well, before I did something stupid and cleaned the gene pool out of my family line, a big semi all of a sudden comes out of nowhere, barreling down the highway going that way. So I thought, well, anything down there now is going to be gone. So my plan was after I quarantined for 7 days, I was going to go back there and see if I saw anything. Now, it was on a private farmer's land, so I couldn't have walked out there. I thought about after 7 days, maybe I'd pull up and ask the farmer if I could go out and look. But on the way back, when I pulled over, I kind of looked out in the field. I thought maybe I'd see some horns laying there on the carcass. I didn't see anything. But a lot of times in Kentucky, a rack that nice on the side of the road gets hit by a car, somebody's going to stop and get it collected. Deer hunters will use them to rattle call in a buck and whatnot.
Yeah,
So
I've done that myself actually. So yeah, I know
yeah, so
exactly
I
what that
think
is.
somebody got, there's no doubt in my mind this deer was gone. Or with what I saw, there's no way that deer was getting away.
I, I I agree with you. I totally agree with you. And that ambush scenario is something that I've heard before as well. You know, I've had a previous guest. I mentioned something about this to you. I know you had commented something on Facebook, and I said, "Oh yeah, Ernie Davino also was in a ambush type of scenario where he walked upon a Bigfoot Sasquatch, and they were." Preparing an ambush for some deer as well. So this is not they are methodical hunters, and it's not just like go and attack, and that's it. No, they're quite smart, and that is a fascinating tale. Now, so when this guy took off, I know he was a ways away because you said you're having issues seeing that. How tall? Because you said when he was crouching, about 3 foot. How tall did he end up getting, in your opinion, and how wide was he as well?
When he stood up, and it's hard to estimate. I talked to Charlie Raymond, the head of the KBRO, and he said, unless you're a golfer, he said golfers have phenomenal way of being able to judge distance and size because they're always calculating how far the hole is and where the hole. So they're very good at it. Well, I'm not a golfer. I'm a fisherman. To me, when I see a catch a fish, I'm telling my buddies about it. That sucker's 19 pounds. But honestly, when I saw it, he it started off about 40 yards away, so he was going away from me. The best thing I could compare, I tell people, one time I saw an NBA basketball game, and you remember Patrick Ewing played for the Knicks? He was probably one of the tallest human beings I've seen. I think he was like 7'2". So I got to see him probably at probably at the same distance in the nosebleed section because at the time I was poor. I was on a Coast
I
Guard
can
salary.
relate. I can relate completely. Yeah, but heck,
So,
you got to go to that game. Yes.
so I was probably the same distance for Patrick Ewing, so I got a good judge of it. But judging from seeing him, I would say 7 to 7.5 feet. But the thing about it that struck me, it is true what I've heard a lot of other witnesses say that they don't have a neck. I believe they have a neck, but their traps are so built up. You look at somebody like Brock Lesnar. He's a good example. He doesn't have much of a neck. He's like a human version of a Sasquatch, basically. If you look at even his block-shaped head, that's similar to what I saw. I feel like I saw something similar to even a jacked up Brock Lesnar, if that's
So Brock
possible.
Lesnar is the missing link here.
He
There
might
we go.
be, but this guy he would
So
have made
everybody,
Brock Lesnar.
you've heard it first. You've heard it first on the Codex. Brock Lesnar is the missing link
There
between
you go.
Sasquatch and us. Yes.
There you go. Now I wouldn't say that to his face.
No, and no, I would not.
No, we'll say it from a distance. I'm assuming I'm a couple thousand miles away from him, wherever he's at. But this thing was like that. It had like the tracks, and you could see like the built up shoulders. So as this thing went up, I could see the length of the arm because as it moved like that, I think that it swung like down by knee length. Mine aren't like that. Humans aren't in that proportion. This thing, Dr. Meldrum calls it the intermembral index. Like on humans, we're a 70, and on like primates, they're 90. So they're more conducive to going down on all fours, and that's another reason I think I'll get into that in a bit. But anyway, I think that it was more. We're in proportion as far as limbs, but their limbs are different, and I'm not so sure working in orthopedics and knowing a lot about how hinge joints, different types of joints. I'm not so sure the way I saw this move that there isn't some other kind of joint that we don't, well, obviously that we don't possess, but something that we haven't seen on another kind of an animal. The way it contorted its arms and hands to look like a spider, four-legged spider, but when they're out, and it kind of, you see this kind of hump, and it's like they got to have some special kind of joint to operate like that.
Interesting. Yeah, I was going to ask a question about that. Now, going back to this encounter, so you were going to go back, but you saw the semi come. What did you? What was the first thing you did then? Like, did you call your wife, or did you go to the cabin and just try to process this, or what happened after that?
Well, the first thing I did was check my britches. No, but I wanted to. I mean, it was that scary. I was really scared, and it's not as scary as somebody on foot. I've talked to some of the people in the book that were on foot, and it's like I would have dropped a biscuit, but I felt like close. My heart was going bad. like the, but anyway, the first so I sat there, and after the truck, it kind of like it's almost like I was mesmerized in a trance, deep in thought. Well, all of a sudden, woo, semi coming. I hear as he's going through the intersection, the Jake brakes. That's kind of what I kind of came to, and I'm like, oh my god, I need to get out of here. So I started thinking I need to get to the cabin. I was about 8 or 9 more miles to get to the cabin. So I thought at that point I need to get out of here. So then when I got to the cabin I'm at, it's Rough River Lake. There are some areas that are really remote. The neighborhood I'm at, it's not remote, but it's not like it's seasonal. Most of the cabins up there, people aren't there in November. In our neighborhood, there might be 30 cabins, and maybe 5 or 6 of them at that time were inhabited year round. And my neighbors, there was nobody lived. I have like woods beside it, woods all the way up behind it, and draws all the way down. So my cabin's right into the woods, and then you got the lake on the front. Um, so when I got there, I was kind of afraid to get out of the truck. I sat there like looking at the woods. I put my lights on bright, looking around to make sure, and then I just felt eerie. Even when I got out, it was quiet and nothing much moving, and it was kind of scary. I wanted to hurry up and get in there. I was undo the security alarm. I had a minute to try to remember what my code was, and I got in there and I locked the door. I deadbolted it, and I put all the blind, made sure everything was shut up tight. I just like for it was unnerving for I would say a week. I felt jumpy.
Oh yeah, to say the least, I can completely imagine that. And you're isolating there. You are isolated, and it's only you that's experiencing that. So did you end up calling your wife? Did you tell anybody? And if so, when did you tell someone?
Well, I'll tell you one little thing. When I got there, this buddy of mine, I had texted him that he lives up the hill. He had My wife wouldn't get me any beer. She said, "You're not going to do that." So I'm not an alcoholic or anything, but my buddy he keeps beer. There was a 6-pack laying in the front of my cabin, so I went in there. I opened one and I sat down on the recliner in there, and I'm contemplating, God, what am I going to do now? So I thought I'm going to call Darlene's my wife. I'm going to call her and check and see, how they're doing and everything. So I did. I call her, and then I'm like kind of hem and hawing. She goes, "What's wrong? I can tell you're not acting yourself." Because usually, like as you can tell, I'm real chatty, and I'm that way at work too. But you have to be with patients. It's actually a plus when you're, working in mental health and getting people to talk. But the she could tell something was I was a little off. So I said, "Well, honey, I don't know how to tell you this." And I thought, because my wife, she's still not really into Bigfoot. She gets kind of worried when she hears me tell about it. It makes her scared. Like she listens to true crime podcasts, and when she does, she locks all the doors. And I'm like, "Why do you listen to this stuff if you're scared?" She'll listen to like your show. She listened to me on our trip. We listened to your show. She really enjoyed it. We listened to Fred Roll on there. We had a good time. So she's
Yes,
into
Fred's
it
a
more
yeah.
now, and she's starting to get more comfortable. But at that time, she was scared. Like when I was telling her, she said, "Well, honey, are you sure you're all right? Are you having any symptoms for COVID?" That's what her first thought was. Like I was
Of course.
hallucinating or
You,
whatever.
you
But
you try to rationalize, and that's what everybody does. They try to
exactly
rationalize or
right.
reason away what you saw. It's like,
Yep.
no, it had to have been something else. It had to have been this. Yep.
There's many times I believe, people always talk about all the Bigfoot sightings, and some of them might be misidentified as a bear. Well, I'm here to tell you, there's just as many people that have seen one that got talked out of what they saw because, like you said, the peer pressure. You start telling family at Thanksgiving, and all of a sudden, like Uncle John's a little off there. Did he get hit in the head? And that's the thing. So a lot of times, I'm at the age point in my life, I don't care. I'll tell people at work. Somebody asks about it, I tell them what I saw. I don't care. But sometimes people can be bullied into talking them out of what they actually saw, and they'll settle on, what, the path of least resistance. Okay, it was a bear, and then they talk themselves into it. So there's just many times I think people have seen them and get talked out of what they saw. But at work now, there was later on at the COVID unit, we were all sitting around one night. It was a rough night. Almost every night we had at least one death on the unit at that time. So we were all sitting around, everybody's exhausted, and there was a couple doctors there and nurses, and somebody just said, "Hey, if John saw Bigfoot, he thought he was gonna make fun of me and get everybody laughing." Well, a couple of them laughed, at first. So I said, "Well, we got some time. I'll tell you if you guys want to listen." I said, "When I'm done, you might send me down to HR to pee in a cup or something, but I'm going to tell you what I saw." So I tell as I'm telling, you get, how you get some people. You can see the ones that are like, and people giggling, and then other people are tuning in. Well, one of these doctors, I could tell he looked like he had his game face. He was serious, listening intently. So after everybody was gone, he was still sitting there, and I said, "Sounds like you got something to tell me." I kind of picked up that you were really listening to what I said, and he was pretty high up. The doctors are on like the boards and all this, so he's got to watch what he said. He goes, make sure nobody looks down around they got a partition. And he goes, "Okay, I'm going to tell you this once, but if you tell anybody," he said, "you and I are going to have locking horns." I said, "No problem, sir. Your secret's safe with me." So he told me he has some hunting property in, I can't remember which county it was. I want to say Ohio. I think it's Ohio County. He's got like some property there and he hunts. Well, he was on a deer stand one time and saw something that wasn't a deer. He didn't go into too much detail, but instead, "Let me tell you, I thought it was another hunter at first, and it was too big." And he said the thing got across this little clearing, got to the edge of the woods, and turned and looked up at him almost just to let him know, "I know you're there. Don't think I didn't see you." And he walked right past him. And so he said, "I believe you." And he said, "You weren't really that far from where I saw what I saw." So that's something interesting. And then another lady I work with, she has land out that way, and they live really rural. And as a crow flies, she's probably 12 miles from where my sighting is. She had something when she was working on her master's degree. She was sitting there up one night about 2 o'clock in the morning. She says they have a window in their dining room. She's sitting at the table working, and for some reason, she just felt something was weird. She looked up and saw something at the window, and she said like she dropped her pen and then she like got up and went to get her husband. When they come back, it was gone. He went outside, moved around, didn't see anything. But then she told me that her neighbors have an apple orchard and they had a couple of game cameras and they got a hold of Charlie Raymond. He's seen the pictures. I think he might have them posted somewhere. The people from the orchard. So it kind of all ties in. It's kind of like this area is tying into a nice little bow. It's starting to make sense. There's something or a few of them in that area, and I think they stay there year round.
Wow. That is a fascinating experience, John. That is fascinating, scary, but so intriguing. Like a lot of us, would love to have that experience, but then again, it just is terrifying as well. We're like, oh, maybe not, maybe not. So, like, if you ever had the opportunity to see another one of these, would you? Would you care to witness another one?
I would say yes. I hear a lot of people I talk to privately say no. It is scary and it scared me. Let me put a caveat on there. I would be absolutely against seeing one if I was on foot or even if I had a gun. I think as big as this I saw, I don't think a gun's going to help much. I think you're going to piss it off like a bear. If you shoot at it, you better make one shot count, and hit them in the Boilermaker. Right there, one shot right in the right place and put them down or right between the eyes. Because if you miss, I think you're a goner. And I think sometimes when people disappear, that might be part of the problem is taking a shot at one. I think it makes them mad. And a lot of the witnesses I've talked to, they said when they pointed a gun at it, they tend to get more PO'd, like they know that they probably observe people hunting, I'm sure, and know what it does. And I think sometimes people shoot an animal that's wounded, they try to find it, they can't. I think these things have already tracked it, grabbed it, put it over their shoulder, and took off with it. So I think they know what the end result, the business end of a gun barrel is. I
I, I
really do.
I've heard that before, where people have tracked an animal and all of a sudden it should have bled out at this point. They find
Yes,
a pool of blood and it's
and it's
gone.
gone.
Yeah.
I think that they are very acute during hunting season that they're going to get some easy meals because I think they could catch them easy. But like what I saw, it looked like it took some effort for something to stalk one out of there. Another one have to that plan ahead on an ambush. If that's indeed what I saw happening, I think it was a hunt. And so they obviously are analytical and plan ahead. So why wouldn't they be analytical and they kind of know in the fall they start hearing guns in the woods? Why wouldn't they say, you know what? We're going to grab a couple deer, these hunters. they're going to have to. They don't kill them right. They don't always drop right away, and I think they know that. But to answer your question, I kind of got sidetracked. So I would like to see another one if I was in a vehicle and at a safe distance, especially if it's a fast vehicle. But the thing is, you got to be careful what you ask for because what I saw, my focus was completely on that one. I believe these things are never ever alone. And when I heard that tree crash, that thing could have easily walked up and ripped the cab up, just ripped the door off and grabbed me, and I would have been a snack for dinner time. But so
You
you
were
get
the
focused on
appetizer.
one.
You were the
Yeah,
appetizer.
yeah, the deer would have been the finishing product. But thinking about that though, that's one thing too. I'd like to point out a lot of people, and I've got a chapter in this in the book about food stores. People always say, "Well, what about food stores?" Food stores. Well, if you study, I studied Kentucky, but I've studied a lot of areas like on this. But since I'm here, I drive around, talk to farmers, food store. What kind of food to animals in the winter? And to look at when the crops draw down. Well, Kentucky right now has more deer than we did in the 1800s. Most people don't realize this because of cultivation farming that keeps whenever the combines are going and they bring in all the corn and all this stuff, there's crap all over the ground that's left behind. Well, that sustains a lot of animals in the wintertime. There's pickings that can be done. And some of these farmers have massive, 1,000 acres, 2,000 acres of seeds laying all over the place. So for the wintertime, the deer that used to starve out, a lot of times you get a cruel winter, and a lot of the deer would die out. They would die of starvation, not enough green grass, or the leaves are gone off the trees, so they were struggling for food. And back then too, the hunting regulations kind of stunk, so they had people feeding their whole family all year on deer. But so that's different too. But right now there's so many deer, and people say, well, we would notice the food chain change if we had Bigfoot. Why? If they've always been here, they've always been part of the food chain, so that's why we don't notice. And judged by the number of deer you see here along the highway get hit, who knows? Maybe they pick up some of the dead ones that get hit. They don't always have to kill something. And if you look at a deer, one thing that I like to try to put some funny stuff in the book to display a point. So one point, so I kind of use funny names like Jeb and Daisy. So I said, so suppose Jeb and Daisy got married and their honeymoon. So no Kentucky boy's gonna go honeymoon in upstate New York. They're gonna, of course, go hunting for their honeymoon. So say old Jeb and Daisy kill a white-tailed deer. Say the white-tailed deer is 200 pounds. So with Jeb and Daisy, of course, they're going to mount the head for their honeymoon. Show I've got this nice buck, and I've got a point to what I'm saying. Trust me, it sounds kind of weird, but
No, yeah,
so
I'm
so they
listening. I'm
mount the
listening.
buck and they got the meat. Now they're going to fill their freezer with meat. Well, out of a 200-pound deer, by the time they cut the head and everything, they whittle down. They might have 49 to 60 pounds of meat. Roughly, I'm kind of out of. I did the research and it's the exact amount in the book, but somewhere in that vicinity, they get that much meat out of it. But if you're a Bigfoot and you kill a deer, you're going to eat all the internal organs. That's all wasted with humans. If you ever see somebody clean a deer in that pile, that's edible food for a wild critter. They're going to eat the heart, the liver, the kidneys, all that stuff's going to be devoured. Not only that, when they get down to the bones, they're going to pick the bones clean. They're going to break the big long bones and get marrow. They can suck bone marrow. So if a human gets 60 pounds of edible material, a Bigfoot, I believe, is going to get like 140, 150 pounds edible material. Well, if an average human, say I'm 200 pounds, and say I need about 6 pounds a day of food to survive, well, say something just twice my size, or 3 times, so twice my size, 12 pounds of food. So 12 pounds of food, say you got a 400-pound juvenile Sasquatch that's 400 pounds. That's still only 12 pounds of food. One deer would feed a number of those things, and they don't have to kill them all the time. And then, not to mention, I got outlined in there all the different nuts and berries and fish, and that's just deer. And I think they're smart enough too. Like Kentucky's got caves all over. We've got Mammoth Cave, and they're still finding extensions of it different places. So far, they've got mapped 300 some miles of cave. Who knows if these things take corn in the summertime and go bury them in the cave in the wintertime. Now you got some corn. So there's
Yeah,
plenty of food.
yeah, the Mammoth Cave system is huge, and that's one thing that people got to realize, that is it's a cave system, but it's also maybe like a highway for them to move around, kind of undetected, possibly, as
Yeah.
well. So So, okay, John, let's go into your book. I know I said prior we'd talk about something else, but maybe we'll move that to the end. Now, what inspired you to write this book? Then so you are a bit of a writer already, since you're telling me that you're writing that your fishing book there.
Uh-huh.
But what was the moment that made you say, "I got to write this book"?
Okay. So I got into the writings. Like I told you earlier, I'm an avid fisherman, fished all my life. And I always knew at some point as I get close to retirement that I wanted to find something else. I don't ever want to be one of these people that retire and then just do nothing. I've seen patients, they die quick. If you don't keep, my dad's 86, he works 3 days a week. He doesn't do it because he has to. He loves it. It keeps him going. I think he would get Alzheimer's. And if you sit there and do nothing, it's not good fertile for your brain. You got to find something. So my goal was I was going to write fishing books. So I started with the first one. I was going to write some technical fishing books, but the first one I wanted to write would be stories about that you don't have to really enjoy fishing. Just write stories about a father and son. You always hear people don't get along with their parents. You hear the bad stuff, but this is a good, like me and my dad, we talk still every day of my life. But it was good stories. So it was cathartic to me, and it was a way to start getting my writing chops down and start developing as a writer and make improvements. So my goal was the next one I was going to write a bass fishing book. Well, then what happened? I had my sighting, and you mentioned about all the things I did at the cabin when I was quarantined. Amongst writing, I started researching about Bigfoots on all four. Like I was trying to make sense of what I saw, if you will. So while I'm researching, I couldn't find. I think two pictures came up of a Bigfoot on four. Somebody's got like a pencil drawing, and it was a pretty good drawing. And then there's another one that's like an animated looking thing, and that's all I could find. And even today with AI, you don't see that many. If you Google a picture of a spider crawl, you won't get that many. And then I even found, I think her name is Melina Sidorova. If you go on YouTube, when people say, "Oh, this can't be done," a human can even do it. There's a ballet dancer named, I think her name is Marina Sidorova. If you go on YouTube, she gets down and she scuttles around. That's the closest thing I've seen on video that you can describe what that spider crawled. And there's a human that could do it. And but anyway, so that's kind of where I was looking, and I started looking for stories, books. I was going to get a book on it. I realized there's no books. There may be books out there that might mention it, but I was looking through the titles and descriptions of books. I went on Amazon, looking. I can't find anything about it. So I thought, you know what? That's usually how good things are made, in my opinion, when there's a necessary niche. Nobody's filled it yet. So I thought, I want to write. I was just getting close to finishing this fishing book. So I thought, you know what? Maybe my next project needs to be a little bit more on that. So you said at the beginning I was a Bigfoot researcher, which I kind of smiled at that. I guess I kind of am now in a way because I spent 3 years studying this. I thought, you know what? So after I looked into it so much, I was compiling so much stuff I was printing off and reading about, and I thought I've got enough here to start on a book. So I decided, you know what? Nobody else has a book on Bigfoot specifically on all fours. So I'm going to fill that niche, darn it, and I'm going to do it myself. So there is a book out there. And when I went into it over 3 years, I talked to a lot of different people, got a lot of good witnesses. Now, some people subscribe to the woo. I'm sure you're familiar with that. I don't know enough about that stuff because I work in a hospital and I have to see a lab and see the results to get a when they diagnose. I have to see a bone break. I have to see what trauma, somebody with mental health, what happened with their family. I'm somebody, I got to see stuff. I'm seeing is believing to me. So, I'm not poo pooing the woo. I don't know. Nobody has all the answers. If I say that's all crap, I might look wrong 20 years from now, and I'm the one that people are laughing at. So I don't discount it. I just go with I'm an analytical kind of person, and so my work I studied physical what people see, getting witnesses, and I found out it's not that easy finding good witnesses. It took a lot of my first time I made a mistake. I went on a popular website. Hey, anybody know I'm writing a book? I got people come out of the woodwork that you would not believe,
Yep.
and so I talked to a
I can
lot of.
relate to that. I can relate to that. Yeah.
It's kind of like dating. When you first date, if you put your profile if you're single, you got to see a lot of warthogs before you meet the beauty queen. So it's kind of like I got a lot, and they were nice people, but some of them I just couldn't use. Like they were two just out there, and I said, you know what? I'll never get somebody like Dr. Meldrum. I wanted him on. That was my ultimate goal. It took me a while to get him on there. And he asked me about what kind of material am I covering. I didn't want to tell him, oh, I've got somebody on here that was abducted 28 times and Bigfoot was in the flying saucer. He wouldn't have signed off on going on that. So I kind of kept it from what I in my wheelhouse, what I know. I'm not good at the other stuff.
Yeah,
So
and I think that's a great way to approach it. You're like, I'm not canceling that out, but that's not what I
right.
want to. I want to keep this more on the physical sides of things. I'm not saying that doesn't happen,
Right.
but this is
And
what
there's
I'm
other
going to
people
write
that have
about.
done good jobs on books that have written
Yep.
about that kind of stuff. So there again, I think that's been covered by other people. I'm trying to cover an area that not that many people. So anyway, it took me a while to hone my skills on how to find witnesses, and it was hard. So some people I met in real life, and I've driven a few number of places meeting people. Other times it was on the phone. Sometimes first contact online and compare notes, and then a long phone call. I did it the old school way. I'd record. I'd tell them I'm going to record the whole interview, type it out, send it to you, get your approval. And some people sign off right away, and some people are very picky. So, stuff back and forth and all that. So I use snail mail for that. And so it was very time consuming, but what was rewarding about it, each time I finished a chapter, I patted myself on the back because it's a lot of work. I like, man, I had hours and hours in that chapter, and I got a good one there. And a lot of times people would let you use liberty. They would tell you, I don't want my neighbors to identify to use this word that I use a lot. Don't put that word in there. So some of them I changed their vernacular a little bit, and for them. And most of them used the real names, but there was I don't know. There was a few of them that there was one guy who was an Air Force pilot. He didn't want his name in there, so he used a different name. He identified himself as being in the Air Force and so forth, but he didn't want his name out there. Just they got to do flight checks and physicals and all that stuff. So there's still a little bit of shakiness with people in those sensitive positions. But I found a lot of good witnesses and talked to a lot of good people. So I feel like basically I filled a niche that wasn't there.
Fantastic. Now, writing this book and going through all these stories, was there one account aside from your own, of course, that really like I don't know, like rattled you, or like stuck in your head that you just was like, wow?
Kind of all of them did because when I first had mine, I thought it was very rare, and I started almost feeling a camaraderie when I was talking to these people. Like they've seen like what I saw, and then we would start getting excited and talking to each other. Like, oh my god, on my siding that happened too. Like, so I started feeling like not as alone, and now we've got something to build on. I think that's how you get the mystery solved of some things, when you find people that have seen what you saw and you compare notes and you learn from each other. I learned a lot from talking to the people. Some of the people, the witnesses, varied backgrounds. You'd be surprised. There's in there an Air Force pilot. There was a doctor. There was a refuse collector. I mean, I had people from everywhere, and it was just amazing. Like, and each person I talked to, I learned a lot. So I can tell you about one that was really disturbing. There's a couple really scary ones in the book, and then throughout, even when the scary ones, I try to shift it a little bit. Like each chapter, I'll tell something about the area, like to learn something. Like one story I did about Venus flytrap. This area had Venus flytraps in North Carolina, so I diverted a little bit, kind of like I'm talking to you. I get sidetracked, but it makes it fun. A lot of people told me they enjoyed learning. Had one guy saw a rock ape in Korea instead of Vietnam, so I did a story section in there on the DMZ, the history of it, how it came to be, and the potential of what wild critters are within that zone. If you think of the DMZ, my God, there's got to be cryptids running around in there. That's
Yeah,
been
they
untouched
got
by
like a
humans
free,
for.
they got a free reign in there for
Oh
sure.
yeah, for
Yeah.
since the '50s, nobody's in there, and it's got very. I can't remember how many acres, like say 800 or 600 square miles. I think it is 600 square miles of wilderness that's not been set foot on or approached by humans. My God, what would be in there? If you could get one of those expeditions to go in there, they could probably find something.
I I agree. I agree totally. So that's really interesting. I like that how you wrote the book. You gave something interesting for each one, and then went forward from there. And I was going to say, like, when you're collecting these stories and you find this camaraderie, between people, that's something that I kind of was like priding myself, not priding myself, but like my show was to bring people together so that they could see that, okay, no, I'm not alone. There's other people who've had this experience. I've seen this. I've heard that before. So that is, I applaud that. Now,
So go
uh,
ahead. I was going to ask
I was
you.
going to say, was there? So did you, when doing all this and bringing all this research in, was there at any time did you notice any patterns or anything like times of day or weather conditions that maybe were more common for seeing this quadrupedal type of sightings?
Um, can I answer that question, man? I didn't do your serbs. I still never really answered your last question about a
Yeah, yeah,
scary
yeah,
one.
yeah. Please,
I was
please.
going to
Sorry,
share one
sorry.
with you,
Yes,
but I was trying to paint the picture that I could really
yeah,
pick out any
and I
story.
jumped over it.
Well, no,
Let's
it's my bad
rewind
because
that. Yeah,
I'm a chatty Cathy. I've been told that, so I get sidetracked. But what I was going to tell you, so this guy, he's one of my witnesses. We've actually since then become pretty good friends. We keep in touch. I've never met him in person. He's all the way in California, but I really like the guy, and he doesn't speak English really well, so we do a lot of texting, and sometimes I'll look up some of the words. But his name is Los Javier, and he was in the Sequoia National Park. This happened just a few years ago. So he has this pickup. He just bought it like 6 months prior. He's got two boys and one of his boys' friends and a nephew, so they were a lot younger. He took them fishing. He said when they go to Sequoia, I think it backs up to Kings Canyon. So you're and they're in the Sierra Nevada mountains, so you're talking millions of acres of wilderness. So they're on a back road. They're fishing all day. The whole day went uneventful. He said, I can't remember the month. I want to say maybe like March, April, where it gets dark early still. He said it was about 5, 6 p.m. and the sun was starting to go down. The moon was already out. It's time to go, boys. And they're driving down this rural road trying to get up to one of the main roads, main arteries to get out of there. So he said, if you've ever had young kids, you know this is what happens. You get 15 minutes down the road, one says, I got to pee. I got to pee too. You know what? I got to go too. So he said, oh my God. So he pulls over. So they're all standing out there taking care of nature's call. And they hear snap. And there's this hillside. And right in the middle of this hill, they see this creature squatted down. And he said it had a stick that it was looking in the middle and then started chewing on one. Well, there's other sticks around. He was picking these sticks up and snapping, not even paying attention. He said, I honestly feel like this thing that didn't even know we were there. And they're watching this thing. It kept chewing on the end of these branches. And then there was something else that stood on the ground. And maybe it was a berry or something. He went like this. And he said they were all standing there. He said, be quiet, be quiet, be quiet. And they're all standing there. Guess by then they pulled the britches up. But they're looking at this thing. And all of a sudden they hear like what sounded like, he said, when people put their fingers in their mouth, make that kind of whistle. There
that
was a
really high
whistle.
pitched whistle. Yeah, yeah.
This thing stops, and he says up the hill further, like this hill had no trees in the middle, and it was trees on either side. Well, this one tree, they could see a torso sticking out. He said, I know it was female because it had breasts, and that was what it whistled. Well, this thing like sat up and then stared straight at him. So he said basically they were eye locked with them. And he said this thing was close enough, it could have come down and easily harmed them. But he said what happened, it was like a stare off for a minute. But then he said, this thing did, he said the only thing I could, this is him talking. He said the only thing I could describe is it did a gymnastic move. This thing all of a sudden went backwards and was on its like backwards with its hands. He said then you could see when it was the stick, it had hands and it had a face. He said it was reddish hair, kind of almost like orangutan colored, but they knew it had hands because it was snapping these sticks. But it went backwards, and he said then it was like a gymnast bent backwards, like they do on a
Yep.
balance
They
beam.
do that crab walk. Yes.
And he went backwards. Now this is the only one I've ever heard. He said it was creepy as HE double toothpicks. He said if you watch the movie The Exorcist, I'd never seen the movie. I'm not into scary movies. I like
Yeah, yeah.
like scary movies give me
It's
nightmares.
funny you say that. Like everything I'm not into scary movies either. I will uh, zombie movies. I'll watch zombie movies,
Well,
but
yeah, I do that too. Yeah.
scary movies like The Exorcist, stuff like that.
Oh
I
God.
I did watch that when I was like in grade 9 or grade 10, and it still stuck with me. Like, and I didn't actually really watch it. I kind of like watched it around the corner, and then I go and run away and do something else. But yeah, I'm not into those things. But yes, sorry. So it walked like The
No, no.
Exorcist is.
Yeah, that's pleasant conversation. So so he said like then he said they're literally like all their eyes are like he said literally he felt like his mouth and they were just looking at this thing. He said it was surreal, but so I got on the Google, and I called the Google, but I got on the Google, and I looked it up, the clip, and he said, look for the one. It's a woman walking down the stairs upside down backwards. And he said that's what it looked like. And I looked at it, I'm like, oh my God. So I told him after the initial conversation, I would look at that and then get back in touch with them. And I was like, man, the creep factor on that one. But and he said what was really weird about it is he said he said I literally like felt like I had to pinch myself to see if I thought, because he said he used to laugh at people. He said I was the one that if somebody else said they saw a Bigfoot, he said I would laugh at him. And he said now I saw something that was like a Bigfoot and it went backwards. It was crab walking backwards. And he said I don't know. He said he was afraid to tell people for a long time. This happened like 3 or 4 years ago. He's just now starting to feel more comfortable telling people about it because he said he wanted his boys to get out of high school so they didn't get ridiculed and start telling. He said if you tell people they'll tell their kids, and he didn't want them to get made fun of. So he's starting to feel a little more comfortable about it. But he said what happened after it did that, it went further up the hill. And then he said, like in one motion, it flipped back up on its feet and was standing straight up and just like gotcha and was staring at him. He said at that point, he whispered to the boys, we got to get in the truck. Let's get out of here. Because he said he didn't know if that thing now was in an attack mode or what it was doing. So they get in the truck. And guess what? Truck doesn't start. He said, this truck's 6 months old. So
okay, I was wondering why you were like specifically saying, "Oh, this is a 6-month-old truck,"
yeah,
but
I
it was
said that
it was a lead up
to the
to
story.
this.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
this was 6 month old truck. He said this shouldn't be. And he said now he's like hearing like the scary music, like, oh my God, we are gonna die. And he said it was so surreal. So he said he's mechanically inclined. He raises the hood, tells the boys to stay put. He's got a pistol he's got in his hand just in case. And so he's looking around and he says there was like a relay that was pulled out just slightly. So he found that, pushed it back in, and made contact, and it started right up. He goes, now I don't know why a relay would pull loose. My guess is they were on the back roads and probably jiggling and bouncing all day going fishing. But he said the thing that scared him, he said what was going through his mind, here comes the sun's going down, moon's coming up. They see two Bigfoot, one's up in the woods. Who knows what's going to happen? He said there's no cell, so they're in an area, it's a dead zone, way out in the wilderness. He said, my God, what if we would have to spend the night knowing these two things were there and they know that we're sitting down there? He said, we would have been sitting ducks. But to me, just on the premise of the whole thing, it's scary. Like it's different than any of the other spider crawls I've been described from any of the other witnesses. But this one like sticks out in my mind because it was like opposite of what. But he thinks I asked him, what do you think it did that for? He said, for one thing, I think that he wanted it. He wanted to go further up the hill just to retreat a little bit, but he also wanted to intimidate them and let them know I can do about anything I want.
That's what I think. Kind of like this
It's as
creep
good as
factor,
any.
or kind of like this. Look at me. Look what I'm doing. And yeah,
Yep. It's as good as any reason I could come up with it. And he was there. Usually when you're there, I think your tuition, people got intuition. I think that witnesses a lot of times are probably right when they could tell, even though these things, I don't know if they're animal, whatever they are, human, semi-human, they have emotion and intelligence. So when you're there and see something in expressions, I think you can read what they're doing. I think they can communicate through body language what they're trying to do. And he thinks they was trying to intimidate him and get him out of there. So he thought he wouldn't have been happy with us with the truck. We would have stayed the night there probably.
yeah,
But
exactly. Yeah, I think you're correct on that. It's like this intimidation
yeah,
kind of thing. It's this one upping kind of thing. Like,
yep,
yeah, I've had a theory about Bigfoot that I don't know if you've ever heard of like the natives were they used to have something called counting coup, and
yes,
I think they do something along that line to show you that I'm the better hunter, I'm the better warrior. Look what I can do. It's kind of like this one upmanship. Like there's a lot of people who talk about their houses being slapped by them. And
yeah,
that's where I got this theory that I think it's like this counting coup kind of thing. It's like, yeah, I came into your camp and look at what I did, and you didn't catch me.
yeah.
So I think there's something along that line with it. So it's interesting.
I think you hit the nail on the head. I grew up growing up in South Dakota. a lot of my friends and people my age were Sioux. We had the Lakota Sioux there, so it was interesting talking to some of my friends that were Lakota Sioux. They would tell you like, well, where do I find this? They didn't have the internet back in those days. You know, I'm kind of telling my age. I graduated high school in '85, but they would tell you we don't write stuff like the elders told me. And the elders have certain things that get passed, and they get gigged on details. He said, if I say something wrong, my elders will correct me. So until you got these, so they would pass down stories. I didn't hear the Counting Coup one, but you probably hit the nail on the head. But a lot of them told me how they would have certain things represent like spirits versus real animals. And so I, you know, even as a kid, I remember one time like asked, well, what about Bigfoot? Oh, that's in the real category. They told me that. And this passed through their elders, and more than one told me on different conversations. So I think there's a lot that the Indigenous Americans and Canadians, we can learn a lot from them. They're like so light years ahead. Like you had Fred Roll on there. I really enjoyed listening to him. Like I was scared. Like wanted to pull over. I was driving on the highway. I wanted to pull over. Like,
That
golly,
was right. That was I felt the exact same way. You know, there was another experience, another person who had a different experience with a dog man that I felt exactly the same way, and his was and Fred's was a Bigfoot, where my stomach was in knots listening to his experience. I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm on edge. I'm like, you got to get out of there, get out of there. Of course he did, because he's telling the story, but yeah, it is a intense experience. The other one was Matt Emch, my good friend who hosts Planet 412. His Dogman experience. That one is one for the ages. You know, one for the books. That's a
wow.
crazy one as well.
Yeah,
But
there's some scary ones in there for sure.
oh,
Yeah.
100%. This has been fantastic. Now, I know I said I'd like to hear a this other story, which is not related to Bigfoot, but it has to do with your sister. Would you mind sharing this one? And
Yeah, I don't
why?
mind.
Yeah, let's go into this, because I think this is a good way to wrap this up. You know, in a kind of like a touching kind of a story as well.
Okay. Um, so I mentioned earlier in the intro when you were asking me about my background. So this happened when I was up in Alaska. I was at the Marine Safety Office in Anchorage, Alaska. So I was living in a hotel for about a year. I lived in this hotel, and back then I don't know if they called them mountain bikes or whatever, but I had this bike that looked like a mountain bike. That was my transportation. So one morning I come in and something was different. Usually there was press out in the middle. Like a couple times I got live on CNN on national news talking about like they want to know how many dead animals we were finding because that's where we kept all the stats. All the news people wanted to know like the like how many dead seals are you finding with oil and whatnot. So we were coached on what we could and couldn't say. You know, if you get they usually had a spokesperson we were to refer, but sometimes if you had to go to the bathroom or something, you're out there and you'll get ambushed. So they coached all of us what you're not allowed to say, what to tell them, and so anyway, there was some of the media, but my captain was standing right there, which was unusual. And he said, Reiners, I need you to come into my office. So I thought, uh-oh. Well, I'm going to back up for a minute and tell you because I wanted to tell that part first. So I already knew something was wrong when he told me I need you to come in my office. So the night before, I was laying in bed reading a book, and I don't know. Sometimes I'll get on different subject and want to learn about it. Well, that particular day, I got a book on the Haight Ashbury, the scene in the '60s, all that. So I remember that book because this whole thing is so vivid in my mind. So I was laying in bed reading it, and I remember I had this green and black striped shirt because that and I'll tell you why I can remember that. So I'm reading this book, and all of a sudden the book drops out of my hand, and my arms go down, and I kind of lay back, and I'm looking at the ceiling, and I feel like I just went numb, completely numb. And the next thing I know, I could see myself laying on the bed in that green and black striped shirt. It was a real busy shirt, so I focused in on that in the book, and I couldn't figure out what was going on. I was like out of my body. I didn't know at that time what it was called. When I just like the Bigfoot thing when it happened, then I started researching. I found out that's called astral projection. So I was out of my body. I saw myself laying there. I don't know how long it was, but before long, I came to, but I still didn't quite feel myself. I felt numb, and then I felt like some agony, doom, something that wasn't right. And so then I fast forward, we're back in the captain's. Captain says, come back to my office. So he opens this big oak door, and there's the telephone sitting on this big mahogany or oak desk, and some water next to it. He says, you go sit there. Your father's on the phone. I'm going to go step out. You take as much time as you need. And when you're done, come out. You've got my office as long as you want. So that's a big deal for the captain to come give. At the time I think I was an E4, to come give somebody like me in his office. Something ain't right. So I pick up the phone. It's my dad. And he says, your sister's killed herself. She committed suicide. So I said I knew something was wrong. He said, how do you know? And I told him, through our crying, I told him I knew something was wrong. I knew something was wrong. Well, my sister was a year and a half younger than me, and they always say siblings know when something's wrong. So later on, I went and was talking to it was like a counselor, it was kind of a clergy council person. And I said, I don't know what this means. I know it's connected. And I kind of came to the conclusion that my biggest fear through this whole thing, what she did, she went into a hotel, locked the door, brought a pistol with her, she put it to her heart and blew a hole in her chest. But through that, trying to, I want to rational. I'm kind of the person, I want to know why. I want to know why. Why did she do this? And so then I feel like what I came up with, this ask her out about it experience, was a message from her letting me know how she felt, this numb, that she wasn't in pain. It was a message to her. I know you're going to worry about me dying in pain. I think she was letting me know how she felt. She was okay, and it was a message to me. And for some reason, after I came to that, I had a more of a will to live than ever before. Now I feel like I have to live for both of us. It's almost like I've got her energy, because the next day I felt depressed, but I felt so different. I felt energetic. It's almost like I got some of her energy. And that's why I'm in mental health now. I knew it would be, I couldn't have done it 20 years ago. I still was too close to when it happened. But now through the years, I kind of jokingly said my knees are going, and you can't do those medical floors forever. So, for the last 10 years before retiring, I'm trying to help people that are in her situation. So, when people say you don't know how I feel when they come in suicidal, I said you are right. But I know how your family will feel. I know how it'll ruin the holidays. I know how it'll hurt this and that. And so I feel like it. I've actually had some nice notes come in where people say that night I sat up and talked to them all night long. They said, "Oh, it really helped more than you know." So it makes you feel good, like you're paying back. But that out of body experience, I think, is what spurred all that on and was the message that it gave me. And so that's kind of the story there. But
Wow,
you know,
that's yeah, that's very, very, very touching, and I like thank you for being there for all these people. Now it's kind of like, I don't want to say it was a gift, but kind of it was. You were given this, and some people will take it, and they'll grow in sadness and they'll grow in despair with it. But you use that. Now you are there helping these other people and helping these other families. So that was, I like I said, it's difficult to call it a gift, but I think you've probably saved a lot of people's lives and families as well because of that.
well, the thing I always say, like, anybody out there, if you're depressed, call 988, 911, 988. You can get help. There's help. That's the thing. My sister never went and got help. She never told anybody she was depressed. She was the most popular. You never knew the signs. She hid it. And the other thing I tell people, don't isolate. If you're already depressed, you're going to talk yourself into worse. You've got to be around people. You might not feel like it. You've got to be around more positive people. And if you're around negative people, you got to find a way to get more positivity. It'll take you down if you're not careful. But that's the message I would say. Take away from that: get help. Don't try to self treat. It never works.
John, that was, yeah, I think that's a extremely powerful message, is like, get help. Don't try to hold it in. Don't go out there and talk. Find someone, and like you said, 911 or 988. Give those numbers a call, and there people care about you, and it's just a matter of you got to reach out. You have to be able to reach out, and thank you so much, John. I really appreciate that.
Yeah, and one thing I'd like to add too, along mental health and about all the different things that we're talking about, is the PTSD. I did put a chapter in the book on PTSD, and the reason I put that in there is people get laughed at sometimes when they have encounters. Like, I've got a spine. I don't care if somebody laughs at me, but some people care. Some people have a worse experience than I did, a more violent, a closer potential to death, and they don't deal with it well. Well, how hard is it to go find a psychologist or psychiatrist when you got half of them laugh at you when you come in their office? So I thought, you know what? I've got connections. I'm going to find who's the best PTSD doctor in my whole region, Dr. David Harmon. So I called him and asked, do you think I could interview? I'm not asking you to endorse Bigfoot. It doesn't matter what your opinion on that is to me. What I want to ask you, if somebody has a traumatic experience that they think is a Bigfoot, can you help them, or would you be one to laugh? And how would you deal with that? Oh, so he told me a lot. There's a good chapter in there. We go through the deep end. I talk about psilocybin mushrooms. I asked him about all those possible treatments. So there's some good stuff in there. But one of the things he told me that really stuck with me, and that's how I end the book with a PTSD chapter. The one right before that details this family that they were on vacation. They were from Ohio. They were on vacation in Louisiana. Their two kids were so traumatized from their experience, they had PTSD. They couldn't sleep, and when they did, they had nightmares, and it was really ruining the dynamics of their family. They had almost like the perfect American family. So they went to a psychologist, a family psychologist, and they laughed at them, and then they felt worse. So it took them a while to find therapy to get there. They needed some help with their kids. So Dr. Harmon, I'd relayed that story to him, and he goes, "Well, that's a terrible therapist." He goes, "As a therapist, if somebody came to me and said I was terrorized by a Sasquatch," he goes, "it doesn't matter if I believe him or not. I don't need to believe him. I don't need to try to decide." He goes, "Too many psychologists try to challenge them. Are you sure it wasn't a bear?" It doesn't matter. They perceived what they saw, and I'm here to help the symptoms. That's what a good psychiatrist does: is treat the symptoms and help them recover. You don't question them; you treat them, because in their mind they already know. You know, if you saw something, you're not going to talk them out of it. If they know what they saw, who are you to judge? Just like I was talking about the woo, who am I to judge somebody else's belief? They might know more than I do on that topic, and they probably do. So when somebody sees it, they're the first-hand witness. So you have to listen to what they say. So a lot of what he said, the chapters are a very good way to end the book, I think, because it really kind of sums up what to do. You know, people never think of that. I've never seen a Bigfoot book talk about the mental health aspects of after you have an encounter. At least people, even like you mentioned, Dog Man, different things. People are devastated, and who do you really turn to? That's where I credit the podcast world. People like you, it gives people a cathartic chance to go talk about what happened. It used to be before podcasts, you might have one friend you could, but sometimes people lose their good friend who thought, man, they're John's getting crazy, so it gives you a chance and an avenue, and then you find out I'm not the only one. There's other people like me, and it creates a community. That's where I like a lot of the people that deal with these different topics. If you join together, like I got friends on Facebook, a lot of different backgrounds. If we band together and help each other, it actually works instead of working against each other. It's just like a detective. Each person finds clues and we try to add it together. So my book is one part of the clue. You know, other people have written excellent books, like Dr. Meldrum. He talks about the footprints, foot morphology, all that kind of stuff. So my book adds, I think, to our on the topic of Sasquatch, one more layer that we could start getting some answers. It doesn't solve anything, but when we compare notes, you start finding similarities and find reasons probably why. Like I think they go to fours. I think they go stealth. I think they hide. I think that they do it to intimidate. I think the spider crawl is purely intimidation, and it's mortifying. I think they do that, and they know it scares the crap out of humans. It looks supernatural, and I think they know it scares us. And I think they also sometimes when people see one disappear, and there's some grass. I think they so fast drop down, and now they're on all four and they get out of there. Well, I just saw them disappear, or else they blend in. But they may disappear at times. But I think some of the disappearing can be contributed to them dropping down on all fours and escape. Look at what a marine does. Look when your house is on fire. What do? Drop, crawl. So it's the same thing. They're in danger, and I don't think they're scared of us, but they're scared of the potential. If we see them too long, or if they wound one of us, a whole bunch more people are going to come into their woods and invade their space. That's their motivation to get away from us and hide, or to intimidate us from wanting to come back.
John, this has been fantastic, and I really, you have a great knack of being such a great storyteller. So I can imagine that your book must be, it must be fantastic. And can you tell everybody where they can find your book once more here before
Yeah,
we pull this to an end?
Amazon. If they just go on Amazon and put Crouching Behemoth, Quadrupedal Sasquatch, if you start putting Crouching Behemoth, it'll pop up. But if you're wondering about the book, if you go on there, I have an excellent. I wrote a little soliloquy about a description of the book. If somebody wants to know a little bit more, there's a really good description of it that'll take them like a minute to read, and it gives a pretty good synopsis of what's in there. There's some humor in there. There's a quiz in there that's a fun quiz after the end, and a lot of other fun nuggets. One quick thing I'll tell you that, and they can find me on Facebook if they want to friend me on Facebook. I'm John Reiners or John Reiners author. I've got more friends on the Facebook. I love talking to people about Bigfoot. I've had people about the book that want to contribute their thoughts on it and pick my brain back and forth. It's a blast. I love it. But one thing that's funny that held up the publishing of the book, on Amazon you can't self promote anything. They like you can't put an ad for like if I'm selling real estate. So what's funny is the first time you put a book on Amazon, AI goes through it first. If it finds any anomalies, then it kicks it over to a human. Well, it took me like an extra almost a month to publish my book than what it should have because there was an anomaly. And finally, what it came down to when I finally got a human, um, I put a joke in there in the beginning and the preface. It's got an empty space, and I can't I put some stuff here, and then there's an empty space, and below it says, if you see that seemingly empty space above, please attach 1995 to a Stella Shimano fishing reel and send it to me, and I'll send you a secret decoder pin to give you the secret of Sasquatch. Tongue in cheek joke, right?
Yeah,
It held up
yeah.
the book for a month because the AI saw that as a promotion for 1995. AI doesn't have a sense of humor. It doesn't recognize a joke. So it took a while. You can't hardly get to humans. So I got chatbots on there. I finally got a human on there. And I knew he was a human because his name was Jesus, but it spelled Jesus. So I said, praise the Lord, Jesus. I hope you're real. And he put LOL. I've never heard that before. Then I said, now I know you're a real human. Can you help me? And he looked into it. And Jesus called me back and said, I found what the problem was. And all that held it up for a month. So there's my point is there's humor in the book. It did backfire on me in one instance, but I try to lighten it up after a real serious story to keep somebody from getting too tense. I would like the next chapter might be a little light at the beginning, kind of change the tempo around. But it's people say it's a fun read. I'm proud of it. It's 439 pages. It's a pretty big book, but
That's a big one. Yeah.
there's no fluff in it. If you look, it's not full of like pencil drawings. It's all the real. It's meat and potatoes.
And And before we end here, I know you said something about the drawing on, the cover of it, the drawing of it, and you were
Yes,
going to talk about that
that's
quickly.
right.
So
I'm glad
let's
you
just do that.
reminded me. See, I got a mind like a steel trap. Sometimes my wife says I got part timers. I forget part of the time. Sometimes I'll remember if it's fishing. I remember if it's mowing the lawn. I forget. So on this cover, so there's the picture there. If you can see that arm, see how stacked that arm was. So
Yes,
this
huge.
guy, I was at work one day, and this lady I worked with, she had this folder, and it was open. It had all these drawings, and I was like, did you draw those? And she goes, no, my son did. And I said, well, what's he drawing that for? Well, he was illustrating a book for their church. They'd gone to this thing in Haiti to go help people, and they were building a school, I think. So they did a book about it to raise money for this school. But his drawings were superb. So I said, would he be interested? Could he do any kind of work? So long story short, she asked him. So I call and talk to him on the phone. So I'm describing what I saw. And he said, I'll send you some prototypes of what you saw. I was describing it. And I said, well, when can you do that? And he goes, well, I'll do it now. I'm texting. I said, what do you mean? He goes, I've been drawing them as we were on the phone. I said, you got to be kidding me. And so he sent it. It looked really close to what I described to him, except the arms weren't right. So I did. I took I mean, that's not that muscular, but I sent him that. And I said, it's muscular like this. And he put, LOL, I'm not around a stick, man. So he ended up beefing up the arms. So I like to joke that the arms were modeled off of me, but it was just kind of a joke. But the kid did a good job. He just graduated high school this last year. But so he did a really good job on it. He was fun to work with.
Fantastic.
His name's Landon Shepard. he can do all kinds of artwork. But yeah, I didn't want to use that. None of this book has AI, nothing in it, not even the cover. And one person tried to say, "Oh, there's 6 fingers on the hand." That's a splayed toe. The back toe's
Okay.
splayed, so he was looking at that. It's not AI. That's the real deal.
Got
But
you. Now,
it's fun. Like I like life and I like
and
having fun.
I will say this: 6 fingers is a whole other topic. I don't know if you know about 6 fingers, but that's a whole other topic,
Yeah.
a whole
Oh
other
yeah.
rabbit hole for another time.
Yep. It sure is. Yeah, you could do a whole show on that.
Oh, yes, I can. All right, John. I want to say thank you so much again for making the time here and coming on. You know, we pulled a little bit of a longer episode, but you were fabulous. You are great at delivering your story and then also continuing on with these stories. So I want to say thank you so much.
Well, Ryan, I really appreciate it. I appreciate your audience listening because you got to have a fantastic audience. Every show I've listened to, I felt like your bar was set pretty high. And I don't know if I brought it or not. I hope I did.
Oh,
But
I
I
think
felt
so.
like, Dan, if I could stand up to some of the guests we've had, even, a little ways. But you've had fantastic guests on here, and I like the quality of your show. You're spot on. I appreciate what you do. You're a pro.
Oh, I really, really appreciate that. Thank you for the compliments, John. And we'll talk later, okay?
Okay, I'll send you a bouquet of flowers.
Yep. You are a bit of a comedian, aren't you?
I appreciate it, sir.
Thank you.
All right.
All right, everyone. That was John. Fantastic guest. I thoroughly enjoyed this conversation. You know, it's a creature, not quite a man, not quite a beast, but it's something that moves between our shadows and between categories. I think is the best way to say it. You know, a behemoth, yes, but not the towering sentinel of popular lore. This one crouches low and moves like a whisper on all fours and vanishes before the mind can catch up. It that it's, and I agree, it's some sort of intimidation. I think it's stealth and everything else, but I think intimidation is big as well. The one where John saw definitely was stealth, though, as they were hunting, setting up a trap and ambush. So again, a huge thank you to John for stepping out of the safety of silence and into the strange to share not only his own haunting encounter, but the accounts of others who dared to look twice. His book, again, everyone, Crouching Behemoth, isn't just a collection of stories. It's a challenge to the narrative. A reminder that even our cryptids have layers we just haven't peeled back yet. And if this episode left your hairs standing on end, well, you're not alone, because in the deep woods, on those back roads and boundary lines, the crouching ones are still watching, still waiting. And never assume that what's behind you is walking upright. So again, guys, until next time, keep the curiosity wandering, keep the light lit, and always find your way home.
Beneath the stars where shadows grow, the Nephilim's echoes whisper low. Bigfoot roams through the forest deep, and Dogman prowls where the brave won't sleep. Across lost history we wonder why, seeking the truth that time tried to hide. Keep your curiosities wandering and the light lit, through the darkness don't ever quit. In the Codex, the mysteries come, and always find your way back home. UFOs streak through the velvet skies, aliens watch with unblinking eyes. The paranormal hums where silence breaks, in the void of secrets a lantern wakes. Through hidden realms and stories untold, the Codex flame is the light to hold. Keep your curiosities wandering and the light lit, through the darkness don't ever quit. In the Codex, the mysteries come, and always find your way back home. The velvet skies, aliens watch with unblinking eyes. The paranormal hums where silence breaks, In the void of secrets, a lantern wakes. Through hidden realms and stories untold, the Codex flame is a light to hold. Keep your curiosities wandering and the light lit. Through the darkness, don't ever quit. In the Codex, the mysteries come and always find your way back home. Legends rise from the Earth's deep core, a lost legacy we can't ignore. With every step, the veil grows thin, revealing worlds where the strange begins. Keep your curiosities wandering and the light lit. Through the darkness, don't ever quit. In the Codex, the mysteries come and always find your way back home. Giants, cryptids that call